Hi, and welcome to the section of the 2026 SRI update training that will focus on LPR and PRP SRIs. LPR is loan portfolio restructuring, and PRP refers to portfolio reinvestment. And we're going to start with the LPR. I'm not going to go over a lot of the basic stuff because that's gone over in other sections. I'm going to really only go over the part that pertains specifically to these programs. So as you can see, the top portion, this is going to refer to a project which only has LPR. You may have other sources of funding on the project. It would just be up to you to make sure that you put those in detail here. So you would want to select yes in the first box for the LPR family. And then in the second box, you would select yes for LPR as well. This project is a TCAC project. We've selected yes for that it is a TCAC project, and we've also entered the placed in service date. If you're confused and don't know what dates to put in here, you can always refer to the documentation that's allowed for tax credit and non-tax credit projects for the placed in service and the gross rent floor here. If you have any null, error, or NA symbols in either of these two charts, that means that something is incorrect in the first tab or in this section above and needs to be corrected. So this project has 10 units. One is a manager unit and 2 are vacant. You can see in this example, we've got some highlights showing that this unit's underoccupied. This income recert is past due. Like I said, I'm not going to go over those in too much detail since they're gone over in other sections. But you do want to make sure that you explain these errors in the explanations column. As it pertains to LPR, if your tenants moved in prior to the date of the restructuring approval, which is defined in your regulatory agreement in the definitions section, they would be a LPR designated unit on your SRI. If the household moved in after the date of restructuring approval, they would be designated as MHP on your SRI. So as it pertains to your SRI, you'll go through and put in all of the information, the current income, the current rent, the number of months at current rent, which means how long you plan to keep them at this rent amount for the report year. So if your report year is from January to December and you plan to change their rent in April, that means for 3 months, they're going to be at the current rent and you would put a 3. Okay, so column K is for LPR target rents. And HCD will do this for you. You don't need to worry about it. But the important thing to note is that when this cell shades light blue, it means that your LPR household has met the target rent. So as you can see, this one's target rent was $640, and they're currently at $700. So that means that the following year, they can be treated like MHP tenants instead of having to be restricted by LPR rent increase protections. That's something that HCD will do for you. And we will note it in your approval comments as well. So LPR units are a little different because the statute requires us to treat them one of 2 ways. If their income is under 35%, we're going to designate them at 35% AMI, and they'll get a 5% rent increase, like these 2 units here. If their actual income is over 35% AMI, we're going to designate them at 60% AMI, and they'll get a 10% rent increase. The new households that are designated MHP, they just follow your unit mix 2 chart from your regulatory agreement. Over on this side of tab 2, you can see that the sponsor has requested rent changes. 2 of them are over the limit and are not approved. The approved rents are noted here. Any LPR units that are currently over 50% of their household income being paid as rent will have their cells shaded green, and that will flag HCD to know that they cannot receive any further rent increases. This example is a little different because they've met their target rent. But if they hadn't met their target rent, we would just freeze the rent until their income went up. So the only other thing I want to bring up is that in LPR SRIs, your unit mix chart on tab 4 will not match the unit mix chart in your regulatory agreement. And you shouldn't try to make it match. Until you have 100% turnover or 100% of your existing households meeting that target rent and converting to MHP, this will not look like your unit mix in Exhibit B of your regulatory agreement. And we understand that. That doesn't make you out of compliance. It just means you're working more and more towards compliance. And that's the nature of the program. So as it pertains to PRP, let's kind of switch gears here. The difference obviously would be that you're going to have a PRP regulatory agreement. It'd probably be a little more recent. And instead of selecting yes on box 2, you're going to select yes on box no. Box 3, sorry. So this is what it would look like. You'd have yes in box 1 and yes in box 3. Everything else is pretty much going to act the same. There will be different rules as it pertains to your households. So let's just say, for example, this project has the same setup where it has 3 different PRP tenants. And it's the same scenario where if your household has been there since before the date of award, you would designate them as PRP. If your household moved in after the date of award, they would be designated as MHP. Same thing applies in terms of AMI designations, where you're going to designate their income based, or I'm sorry, their AMI level based on their actual income. So if they're over 35%, they're 60% AMI. And if they're under 35%, they're at 35% AMI. One quick thing I want to point out is column B has changed a little bit this year. This one now pertains to rent increase limit waivers for Assembly Bill 846, which went into effect this year. It still does allow you to designate a manager unit by selecting M, but it also gives you the ability to tell us what the status of your rent increase waiver request is. And all of those details are here in this comment. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to your occupancy rep. We've also put out some guidance on the HCD website that you can follow as well. So back to PRP, it's going to function almost exactly the same. The only difference is that PRP has a different rule where if your tenant has income over 80% AMI, they will be, you'll be allowed to charge them up to 30% of their income in rent. And that's for existing households. If your household is a new household and is over 60% AMI income limit, you can charge them up to 30% of their income in rent. Again, you really need to make sure that that's okay with the other regulatory agencies that are on your property. And you also need to make sure that it complies with state, federal, and local rent increase restrictions. This is going to do the same thing. Over here, there's not really much else different. We want to make sure that we always refresh before we submit. And if you don't see one of your programs, it's probably hidden and you can go in and unhide it. And again, it's going to be the same thing here. Like I said, with LPR, this will not look like your unit mix 2 until you have complete turnover. So don't worry about it. It doesn't make you out of compliance. That's the end of the training. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to your occupancy rep, or you can reach out to your transactions rep if your transaction has not closed. And thank you so much.